And so for this, this is something that, again, is part of the integrity and finance class, obviously. And I find it to be very important, and I would love to see everyone do this for their own organizations or for their own church. And again, it's helpful to go through it in order to teach it, but I also think it's something that we should be going through regularly. And so I originally created this assignment based on the Evangelical ECFA, Council for Financial Accountability in the US, the ECFA. Which is an organization that everybody who has a nonprofit needs to go through because you want their stamp on your website to show that you are financially accountable. And then I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, John Gerst of, I forget the man's name, who told me about the ACA, the AFCAA, the African Council for Accreditation and Accountability. I'm sorry?
Maybe it was Bob Sturm?
Yes, it was Bob Sturm. Thank you. So Bob Sturm, and I was in Ethiopia, and Bob Sturm from Kibber told me about this organization. And they were actually set up from the ECFA, built off of ECFA in the US. And so, but it was designed for Africa by Africans, and it's headquartered in Kenya. And so it's the African Council for Accreditation and Accountability. And basically what they have done is they have said, you know, we also need to standardize what are the accountability standards that we want for Christian nonprofits, for churches, and so on. And so there's 7 different standards. And so the request for this final assignment is that you select your ministry, your church, or if it's too difficult to do your own, you do a partner's ministry or church, and take a look at the application, go through that application and answer the questions on that application as to the 7 standards for accountability. And then it's just a 3 to 5 page paper that then you take those standards, and I'll go through this, and evaluate based on what you know, based on what you believe, what does that organization or ministry meet the standards? And if not, what would you say needs to be done in order to raise it to that level? And this is something I think that we all need to continue to do on an ongoing basis. So let's take a look at this. The goal of the final assignment is to work with a church, a ministry, or an organization to assess their compliance with the African Council for Accreditation and Accountability, the 7 stewardship and accountability standards. You're not going to submit it to them. If you want to become a member with them, I think it's $300 or $500 US. We're not asking you to do that, although if you do it, I think that's great. I did get permission from them to use this for the class final assignment, and so they know that you're using it. You just won't submit it to them, but you're welcome to do that. The paper will evaluate the church or organization on each stage and make recommendations where improvements are needed. The evaluation and recommendation portions are a key part of this paper as you reflect on what you observe and compare it to what you have studied in this class. So in the preamble of the AFCAA, it says this: in mentoring and nurturing Timothy towards effective leadership and accountability, the Apostle Paul writes from 2 Timothy 2:2, the things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable men who will also be qualified to teach others. Here is a call to preserve the pure and unadulterated faith once delivered to the saints. Timothy had heard from Paul's lips a certain form of sound words, something in the nature of a creed, some summary of gospel truth, which was the deposit placed in his charge. Through the laying on of hands on him, the whole church had assented and confirmed the same. Timothy received his commission to preach the word of God, and what he received, he was to hand over in like manner to faithful men, who in turn were to teach others, and others also. In a similar manner, we too, in our generation, are to develop and commit to upholding standards of accountability in how to interact with others in the course of carrying out our work, and in how we mobilize and utilize the resources entrusted to us. We are to share the same with others and require them too to do likewise, down the generations. In the scripture quoted above, there are 4 generations of ministers cited: Paul, Timothy, others, and others also. Assuming that each of these were in ministry or leadership for, say, 10 years, that would translate to 40 years of sustainable ministry and accountability. This then is the essence of the AFCAA standards: to commit to enhancing and sustaining accountability in all areas of our lives, in our generation, with a view to ensure that we pass on the same principles to the next generation. All right, and so that is the goal that we are working on in joining with the AFCAA for this. So the first one is the doctrinal foundations. That's the first of 7 standards. Every member of the AFCAA shall operate in accordance to biblical truths and practices and subscribe to a written statement of faith clearly affirming a commitment to the evangelical Christian faith. AFCAA is a faith-based organization and identifies the following as the essential elements underpinning the evangelical Christian faith. Now, we're not going to go through all of that, but basically your first question to the organization that you will be assessing is, do they have a doctrinal foundation? And then what is it? And then do they live that out? And so that is standard number 1. And all of the documents that you need for this is on the Google Classroom in the final assignment tab. The second standard has to do with leadership and governance. Every member of the AFCAA shall be governed by a responsible, accountable board of not less than 5 individuals, the majority of whom shall be independent. Okay, so that means that we don't have all family members, we don't have all people from the same, where there can be conflicts of interest, right? We want them to be independent. A board is defined to include church and church elder councils, advisory boards, and statutory boards. Board members should be competent individuals who have demonstrated a commitment to honesty, loyalty, and excellence. The organization must demonstrate a process of board orientation and training in matters of corporate governance. The board must meet at least semi-annually to ensure vision and mission alignment, establish policies, and review organizational accomplishments through the strategic plan. Furthermore, the board shall ensure the organization has systems and structures that enable it to discharge its moral, fiscal, and social responsibilities. And then you can see the pages 6 through 9 that go further. And so you want to be able to assess the organization. Are there at least 5 independent members? Do they meet twice a year? Is there a strategic plan that they're following? Is there an orientation? And again, your goal is not to go in and say, you know, you're doing this wrong, but it's to assess and to evaluate. If it's your organization, you could say, we're doing this wrong, we need to make some changes. But the idea is to go in to evaluate what is the leadership and governance like. Standard 3 is talent management, and I like this. Every member organization of the AFCAA shall seek to attract talented, honest, and committed persons into its workforce using fair, transparent, and equitable processes. So how do we hire? Is it equitable? Every member shall also seek to place its people in roles that are aligned with their gifting and experience. The organization shall put in place a staff retention mechanism, as well as staff development programs that encourage personal growth, career progression, and skills upgrade. And so what I like about this is that they're saying you need to manage your talent and help it to grow and celebrate the gifts that are being given. How are you doing that as a responsible employer? The organization shall strive to pay competitive market rate salaries that take into account the dynamic work environment and the organization's ability to pay. Every member organization shall be put in place mechanisms that ensure the economical, emotional, spiritual, social, and physical welfare of its staff. And talent management, unfortunately, is too often ignored. And so we spend a lot of time firing people and then hiring people and then training them rather than pouring into the people we have and allowing their talents to be developed. Standard 4, learning and innovation. Every member of the AFCAA, excuse me, I'm going to go a few minutes over, I hope that's okay, shall promote a learning environment where critical thinking and dialogue are encouraged and celebrated. Every member shall institute policies to promote knowledge management within the organization in order to keep abreast with best practice and technology upgrades for their area of focus. The organization shall strive for a better understanding of the social, economic, political, and spiritual element of its environment. Innovation, research, and development shall be part of the organizational culture. So here you're saying, okay, we're managing our talent and people are in places, but we also want them to keep growing. And so what plan do we have to allow people to take time off, or maybe to attend workshops, or maybe we do a book club? What are things that we can do to help people to continue to grow so that they can continue to do better and work with excellence? Standard 5, cultural differences, acceptance, and interdependence. Every member of AFC-AA shall foster a culture of acceptance, unity, love, and compassion where individuals are not discriminated against because of their gender, origin, age, disability, ethnicity, or race. The organization shall embrace and celebrate cultural differences that are consistent with biblical truth as God's creation, and shall encourage the organization's staff to use cultural diversity for mutual enrichment. AFC-AA shall promote teamwork, interdependence, and partnership with like-minded entities, fostering mutual respect. And so on the application, you will see a number of different questions that ask about the gender makeup of the board, of the staff, the age differences. Do we have only young people? Do we have only old people? Ethnicity, race, all of these things, so that we are able to examine ourselves to say, we have a challenge in this area, and how can we grow to be a reflection of what the kingdom of God will be like in heaven. Standard 6, financial management. Sorry, my thing is blocking it. And disclosure. Every member shall design and implement the internal controls necessary to provide reasonable assurance that all the organization's resources are acquired and used in a trustworthy manner in furtherance of the organization's vision and mission, and in conformity with all applicable laws. Each member is required to account for all financial resources in a transparent manner, and to provide complete and accurate financial statements as defined by AFC-AA policies. Every member shall provide a copy of its current financial statements to a current or potential donor upon written request. This includes the internal controls for financial resources, including procurement, financial management, financial disclosure, oversight, audits and reviews, compliance to biblical values in investing and grant making, and compliance with applicable laws and regulations. And so here, now we're raising the bar a little bit to the financial level. Every member should be able to provide a current financial statement to a prospective donor. And the interesting thing is, as I've given this assignment out, this has been the one that's most difficult. There are many students who come back and say, the church refuses to give financial statements. There's a lot of people that protect that because there's a lack of trust, and yet we need to change the language on this to say we have to be open. In fact, if you go to most websites of nonprofits in the United States, it's required that your recent tax report, which includes the salary of the executive director or the president, it's posted on the website. That is a mandatory thing. You need to be able to be that transparent. And so, again, we want to look at that and begin to look through how are the financial resources handled? Do we have internal controls that give oversight for procurement? Who gets the contracts for different work? Is there a conflict of interest, as we know that there are in some government offices for that? All right, last one is standard 7, resource mobilization. Donor or investment expectations. Fundraising appeals must not create unrealistic expectations of what a donor or investor's funds will actually accomplish within the AFC-AA members organization, or in the case of donated funds within the donor's life. So we shouldn't say that if you give the equivalent of money of 1 coffee a day, you will save this family's life or this child's life. Okay, we don't give unrealistic expectations, nor do we say if you give, you will go straight to heaven. So we don't give unrealistic expectations. 7B, truthfulness and communication. Members must provide a current report which includes financial information on any specific project for which it is soliciting funds. All communication used to mobilize funding must be current, complete, and accurate. References to past, present, and proposed activities of the fundraising entity or its partners must be appropriately dated. There must be no material omissions or exaggerations of fact or use of misleading photographs, videos, or any other communication which would tend to create a false impression or misunderstanding. So what is the communication that the organization that you are looking at is doing to raise funds, to communicate about what they are doing? Is there truthfulness in that communication? Are they using photographs from other partners? Are they using old photographs? It needs to be current. 7C, use of funds. All statements made by members in fundraising and about the use of the gift must be honored by the member. The donors or investors' intent is related both to what was communicated in the appeal and to any donor or investor instructions accompanying the funds. The member should be aware that communications made in fundraising may create a legally binding restriction. And so that is why if you are raising funds for COVID, for example, and somebody gives for that, you are legally responsible to use it for that. And that is why you will sometimes see people say, when they're doing a donation drive of some sort, that if more is received than what was needed, then it will be allocated to A, B, or C. And if you don't put that in there, that's the problem that we had in Haiti when Haiti had the earthquake. So much money was given, and that clause wasn't put in there that they were obligated, these large NGOs were obligated to give all this free stuff away in Haiti, which actually ended up destroying the economy. But use of funds, we have to do what the donor said. So if you don't like what the donor said, don't accept the funds, because once you accept it, you are obligated to do what they've requested. 7D, projects unrelated to a member's primary purpose. A member mobilizing or receiving funds for programs that are not part of its present or prospective activities must either treat them as restricted funds and channel them through an organization that can carry an owner's intent, or return the funds to the donor. And so that means you've declared what type of ministry you are. For DML to accept any funds relating to hospitals and treatment of people with COVID, it's not within our mandate. It's not what we do. We would need to channel that through another area, or we would need to return it. So you need to know who you are and stay focused on what it is that you've been given permission, assuming you're registered by the government to do. Last one, acknowledgement of gifts in kind. Property or gifts in kind received by a member should be acknowledged, accurately described without a statement of the gift's market value. So you can say, if they give you a car, you can say, thank you for the car, this is the identification number, but you can't say valued at. That's the responsibility of the person donating to determine the fair market value of the property for accounting and if applicable tax purposes, and they should use professionals to determine the accuracy of the market value. So you can acknowledge it, but don't put a monetary value to it. So for your final assignment, which is due a month at the end of July, I would like for you to fill out the application, which you can find in Google Classroom. Do it as much as possible with the leader of the organization. And so what I say to people is, this looks like it's a big assignment, but it's really not. If you sit down for an hour with the leader of an organization, you should be able to go through that application. If you are the leader, it goes even faster. Gather the required documents that are listed there in the application, and then scan them and save them. And then write a 3 to 5 page paper that evaluates the church or the organization on each of the 7 standards and make recommendations where improvements are needed. So the format of your paper, you would have an introduction. You would have the standard 1 evaluation, which is the doctrinal foundation. Do they have a doctrine? Do they have a statement of faith or beliefs? And then are they living it out? What do you see and observe? What would your recommendations be? Then standard 2, you give your evaluation, the recommendations, and then all through standard 7, and then the conclusion. All right.